He that hath God his guardian made shall underneath the Almighty's shade fearless and undisturbed abide. Thus to myself of him I'll say, he is my fortress, my shield and my stay, my God in him I will confide. His tender love and watchful care shall free thee from the foulest snare, from every harm and pestilence. He over thee his wings shall spread, to cover thy unguarded head. His truth shall be thy strong defense. He gives his angels charge o'er thee. No evil therefore shalt thou see. Thy refuge shall be God most high, dwelling within his secret place. Thou shalt behold his power and grace, see his salvation ever nigh. Dwelling within his secret place, thou shalt behold his power and grace, see his salvation ever nigh. See his salvation ever nigh. Not what I am, O Lord, but what you are. That alone shall be my soul's release. Your love, not mine, bids fear and doubt depart, and stills my tumult with your heavenly peace. Clothed with the love of God on every side. I breathe that love as heaven's own healing air. I work and I pray, and I follow still my guide, and fear no foe escaping every snare. Not what I am, oh Lord, but what you are. That alone shall be my soul's release. Your love, not mine, bids fear and doubt depart, and stills my tumult with your heavenly peace. It's what I know of you, my Lord and my God, that fills my soul with peace, my lips with song. You are my health, my joy, my staff, my rod. I lean on you, in weakness I am strong. Not what I am, oh Lord, but what you are. That alone can be my soul's release. Your love, not mine, bids fear and doubt depart, and stills my tumult with your heavenly peace. Not what I am, oh Lord, but what you are. That alone shall be my soul's release. Your love, not mine, bids fear and doubt depart, and stills my tumult with your heavenly peace. Your love, not mine, bids fear and doubt depart, and stills my tumult with your heavenly peace. So good to be back, to be part of this South Lake Tahoe summit, which happens every year. And I think this is probably the fifth year in a row, fifth, I think, that I've been able to be with you, sometimes in person and sometimes online, I guess. But just so happy to be included and to have the opportunity to think about what our two speakers are going to be talking about today. So hopefully it'll wrap up or surround the spiritual truths which are going to be shared with us later. This is a version of "The Lord is my shepherd," which I love, and it's suitable for any occasion. The Lord is my shepherd, I'll not want. He makes me down to lie in pastures green. He leadeth me the quiet waters by. His goodness restores my soul. His goodness restores my soul. His goodness restores my soul. And I will trust in him. And I will trust in him. And I will trust in him. Though I walk in the darkest path, I will fear no evil. He leads my way in righteousness, anoints my head with oil. For you are with me, your rod and staff comfort me still. Yes, you are with me. That's all I need to know. And I will trust in him. And I will trust in him. And I will trust in him. Yes, you are with me, your rod and staff comfort me still. Yes, you are with me. That's all I need to know. And I will trust in him. Yes, I will trust in him. And I will trust in him. You are with me. That's all I need to know. Okay. So, a couple more from me before we welcome our first speaker today, and I'm looking forward to her talk. I know I was majorly impressed by some thoughts that she had when I heard her talk or speak at annual meeting. I think it was last year. So I'm very much looking forward to hearing what she has to say again. Okay, a couple more from me. What shall I do? Let's have a look. I'm going to do two new ones. This is called Engraved Upon the Heart. The harmony of man is whole, unbroken, pure and free. No shadow can obscure the light that shows our unity. The breath of love sustains our song, truth that cannot part. God's likeness shines forever strong, engraved upon our hearts. God's likeness shines forever strong, engraved upon our hearts. When sense would whisper fear or pain, hold steadfast, still and true. Let not the shadow tempt again the light revealed in you. For life harmonious ever is, and nothing can divide the calm, clear trust that knows his peace, forever at our side. That calm, clear trust that knows his peace, forever, forever at our side. Engraved upon our hearts, dear Lord, your word, your perfect art, with angel pen and diamond point, the lore of love thou dost anoint. The breath of love sustains our song, a truth that cannot part. God's likeness shines forever strong, engraved upon our hearts. God's likeness shines forever strong, engraved upon our hearts, engraved upon our hearts. Then sorrow turns to holy joy, and tears are gently dried, for love will meet each human need, and fear is swept aside. The breath of love sustains our song, a truth that cannot part. God's likeness shines forever strong, engraved upon our hearts. God's likeness shines forever strong, engraved upon our hearts. Okay, this is a new version of a poem that recently came out in a Christian Science Sentinel, originally called Drawing Close to You, but we edited it down, and it's now called One With You. And this is the last song that I'll do just before we welcome our first speaker for this afternoon. No mortal sense can still be heard when truth begins to speak. A quiet voice, a healing word, so tender, strong, and meek. Love whispers gently in the soul, and fear is swept away. Its promises make the broken whole and light the darkest day. A voice of God so pure, so near, you calm the storm inside. No sound of earth can draw me far, far from where your truths abide. You speak in quiet, not in noise, in stillness, deep and true. And every longing heart is healed, knowing we're one with you. No mortal sense can still be heard when truth begins to speak. A quiet voice, a healing word, so tender, strong, and meek. Oh, voice of God, so pure, so near, you calm the storm inside. No sound of earth can draw me far, far from where your truths abide. No fleeting thought, no rush of time can hush that sacred tone. It sings above the world's unrests. You're mine and not alone. Not heard by ear, but crystal clear. Not seen, but ever real. This love divine is always here, to bless, to guide, to heal. You speak in silence and in words, in love that gently fills, and all creation leans to hear the song love whispers still. You speak in silence and in words, in love that gently fills, and all creation leans to hear the song that love whispers still. Thank you so much, and I'll see you all later.
This isn't as planned, but we'll go ahead. Happy Memorial Day, everyone, and welcome to our 12th Spiritual Summit. I forget the second line. Healing Solutions to Life's Challenges. I should remember it. I wrote it, right? Andrew did a great service for us. He seems to have lost his passport and his special visa to get into the country. So we had to improvise a little bit, and he did his thing, and we'll do ours. So it's my pleasure today to welcome you all to South Lake Tahoe. again to our 12th Spiritual Summit. Over the last 11, we have accumulated over 250,000 views on our Facebook channel of people that have rewatched, rewatched. I don't know how many duplicated it, but it doesn't count until you get to the end. So there's 250,000, and we're going to add to it today, and we're somewhere close to 100 already this morning. So that's the way it goes. So with that, who's first? You sure? Okay. I would love to introduce Mr. James Shepard from Eugene, Oregon, who's here with his lovely wife, Tara. And he has some words of wisdom to share with us and some lines to help fill our smorgasbord that we have been continuing on. So, Sir James, welcome. Thank you, Joe. We improvise.
Thank you. Thank you, Joe. Thank you to all the members of First Church of Christ Scientists, South Lake Tahoe. I know it takes a lot of work to do some of this stuff, so I've been watching you busily work. And thank you to the tech crew in back, Brandy and her crew. Here we go. So today I'm going to be talking about why everyone is needed. It seems like today there's a lot of people who've kind of lost hope, maybe looking for solutions to their problems, healing solutions to the changes in life. So we're going to see today how, by getting a better sense of our purpose and worth, how that can give us a better sense of our value, and how it's that gives us hope in our lives. I want to just let you know that the design of this isn't just for everybody to feel good and then go back, go home, but to show how, by getting a better sense of our value and worth as the child of God, how that can have this impact on our lives. I think there's certainly times in everyone's life when they've wondered, what is my purpose? What is my worth? What is my value? And so hopefully today we'll be seeing that and seeing how we can get a better sense of our value and worth by seeing that child of God. And everything I'm going to say today comes from what I've learned from Christian Science. I travel around quite a bit, and when people ask me what I do and Christian Science comes up, sometimes they kind of look at me with this little puzzled look like, is that some kind of Scientology? No. Scientology was started by a man in the 1950s. He was a science fiction writer. Christian Science was discovered by a woman back in the 1800s, a deeply Christian woman. Well, we've just kind of all been calmed down for 15 minutes by Andrew, so I hope you guys don't mind, but we're going to kind of shake things up a little bit. Is that okay with everybody? You guys feel like maybe moving a little bit and all? Let's see. There we go. So let's look at this topic of being needed. What does it really mean to be needed? To do that, I need your participation. You guys ready to participate? Yeah. All right. You guys feeling imaginative, like you can imagine something? Can you imagine that you're a bolt? I see a few people kind of wondering with that, where we're going with this. Imagine, have you ever been to a hardware store with all those boxes of bolts, all those bins of bolts? It's like my favorite place to go. I just love to look at those bolts. Well, imagine all of the bolts in the whole Lake Tahoe basin, and all the hardware stores in the whole basin. And you're just one little bolt. So I like scales. So on a scale of 0 to 10, how valuable would you feel? One little bolt out of all the bolts in all the hardware stores in the whole basin. I need a number. 0, 1, okay. What if you found you were a specially made bolt? Would that help a little bit? 5, great. What about a bolt with a purpose? And your purpose was to hold these big steel beams together on a bridge. This is a bridge between two huge population centers. There's no other bridge, no other boats, no other tunnels. All the transportation, communication has to go over that bridge. And you're a little bolt that's helping hold up that bridge. And without you, that bridge wouldn't be there. Is that helping you feel a little more valuable? Got a number now? 9. Okay, so imagine, this is a closer look at the bridge. And you'll find that you're not the only bolt on that bridge. There's hundreds, thousands, maybe millions of other bolts. They look a lot like you. They might have a little different color, size, shape. But they're each helping hold up the bridge as well. Think of how valuable suddenly that makes everyone. And this is why, sometimes, maybe all of us have done it. Gosh, I wish I was like him or her. Wish I had their money or their whatever it is. This is why we don't ever want to be like someone else, because we can't ever fit in to where they were designed by God to fit in. And that's why nobody can take our place. Because God has created each and every one of us to be unique and on purpose. We're not just some unneeded, unnecessary bolt somewhere. And I love that thought that we've been made with purpose and on purpose. You know, if I can just realize I've been made on purpose by God, I don't even know if I have to know exactly what my purpose is. That helps me get this great sense of value and worth. So, today as we look at value and worth, let's kind of think about how absolutely needed we all are as the creation of God. Because it's not really our human value or worth. You know, someone can always take our job. Someone can always replace us, it seems like in the human world. But that true being that God has created us to be is always there. Christ Jesus saw this. Christ Jesus so clearly saw everyone's value and worth that he could heal anyone. You know, the Jews at this time were occupied by the Romans. The Romans weren't very nice, but he even healed Jews because he could. Thank you. He even healed Romans. It's always good to have my wife in front. He even healed Romans because he knew that everyone's value and worth was dependent upon who they really are as the child of God. So, to get a better sense of our value and worth, we've got to get a deeper sense of who we are. To get a deeper sense of who we are, we've got to get a better sense of what or who it is that created us. This infinite, good intelligence that created all in the universe. The Bible calls that God. I know a lot of people today may not even believe in God or question if God exists. I think that's maybe because sometimes the notions about God are just too small, too narrow, too limited to fit into this huge universe that we know God's created. So we have to expand our sense of what God is. And how can we do that? Well, Christian Science is deeply rooted in the Bible. And I love to go to the Bible when I'm trying to get a better sense of who I am or the nature of God. And when I go to the Bible, I usually like to go first to what Christ Jesus said. I feel like we're getting closest to the heart with what Christ Jesus said. What did Christ Jesus say? He said, about God, he said, God is spirit. Well, what's that like? God is infinite spirit, this all-loving, all-intelligent spirit. I'm still working on getting a better understanding of that, what that is, but I can see that does mean that God's more than just a man, maybe with a beard, up in the sky somewhere, maybe writing down some things that we did right or wrong, or preferring some nations over others or some people over others. But God as spirit, infinite spirit, is a power and a presence that we can really feel. How else does the Bible talk about the nature of God? Christ Jesus, again, called God Father. Abba was the Greek. And a lot of people translate Abba as meaning daddy. Sometimes it might seem like spirit is a little theoretical, kind of hard to understand, but God as daddy. So when we combine God as spirit and God as daddy, it really gives us that sense that God is right with us. This infinite spirit is right with us. In her book, Science and Health, with Key to the Scriptures, Mary Baker Eddy talks quite a bit about the nature of God and about God as spirit. And she shows that because God is spirit, because God is infinite, God can't be finite. God can't be a physical being. A physical being can't be everywhere all at once. So this infinite spirit, this daddy, is right here. Right on line with all of you viewing, right with each of us here. This God as infinite spirit. I sometimes have to remind myself of that, because sometimes I think of, the spirit and, God's everywhere, but that means right here within each and every one of us. Another way the Bible describes the nature of God talks about God as love. Anyone heard of that? God is love. Love itself. This is more than just a human sense of love. That's a good start. But God as infinite love means that God knows everything about us, is meeting all our needs all the time, even when it doesn't feel like it at times. There's a Hebrew text that speaks to this back in Deuteronomy. Like an eagle that rouses her chicks and hovers over her young, so he spread his wings to take them up and carried them safely on his pinions. And pinions are those flying feathers. Those flying feathers. So that shows the tenderness of God's love. If this is like a photo of trying to depict the nature of God, this mother bird or father bird, this loving, all-loving love, that's each of us, the little eaglet, always under that outstretched arm or wing. I know it doesn't always feel that way. That's what helps us in progress and healing, is recognizing God's infinite, God's love's infinite, and God's always with us. This passage, besides showing the tenderness of God's love, it shows the strength of God's love. Sometimes we don't always think about love as strong. I saw a sign recently that said, love is more powerful than hate. I sort of disagree with that. I think that love is the only power. And hate is just that, sort of the absence of love. But when we have love, that eliminates the hate. This infinite love of God. That's a power. That's a presence that we can really feel. Maybe if we've come upon some obstacle in our lives. I don't know, does anyone in here ever have an obstacle in their life? It's that power of love that rises us up and over that obstacle. Okay, let's look a little bit more in the Bible. Very beginning, Genesis says that God is the only creator. What's another word for creator? Cause. God's the only cause. Well, what does every cause have to have? An effect, right? Can there be a cause without an effect? No. And there can't be an effect without a cause. It's that unbreakable law of cause and effect that gives us our oneness with God. That gives us that unbreakable connection, because every cause has to have an effect. That's really our purpose, is to be the effect of God. You know, if you're ever wondering what your purpose is, or maybe wondering what that guy or that gal's purpose is, the purpose is to be the effect of God. God has created us that way, because every cause has to have an effect. And God needs to be expressed in an infinite amount of ways. So think about that as your purpose. Or again, as a purpose of, you know, a person who maybe lets their dogs bark all night long, or a person who cut you off on the way here. They don't do that in South Lake Tahoe, do they? They don't cut you off. Whenever we're not seeing someone as the child of God, we're seeing them incorrectly. Well, I'm going to cover one more. The Bible talks about God being all, God being everything, God being infinite. So follow me here with this. If God is infinite, then the effect, the outpouring of God must be infinite as well, right? I mean, all that love and joy and harmony, peace that's God has to be expressed. Those aren't just kind of ideas floating around. Those are tangible ideas that are expressed by each and every one of us. As a matter of fact, every one of us in this room and online, right now we're each creating, expressing God's nature. Each in our own different, unique way. So that's a way for us to recognize that we are like absolutely essential, because God's universe wouldn't exist in its allness and fullness without any one of us. Or without that guy or gal under the bridge, or without that politician or world leader that maybe we're having a hard time. But as we view more their true nature as a child of God, as the effect of God, we'll better see their purpose and value. I know the world doesn't always see it that way. Probably aren't. You probably, when you walk down the room or down the hall or down the street, you know, you don't have people welcoming you as the child of God. The world has a whole different way of valuing our nature and worth, and that's what gets us in trouble. So I'm going to need you guys' help again for a little. I think it's fun. A little fun here. I'm gonna make up here a real high-tech instrument. And I'm going to type in all of the things that the world says gives us our value and worth. And we're going to call it the world's worthiness scale. That's all the ways that the world incorrectly judges our value and worth. So I've got this high-tech computer. You guys probably can't even see it very well out there in the audience, but I got this high-tech computer, and you guys are going to share with me what are some of the ways that the world incorrectly determines our value and worth. What are some of the things that the world does or says? What's that? Wealth. Gender. Employment. Education. Prestige. Body image. You guys are great. Okay, you get the idea. Let's say we plug all these into our world's worthiness scale. And because it's so high-tech and light and small, we all take one home with us. We get up in the morning, kind of stretch, and jump on that world's worthiness scale. Now, sometimes our worthiness, we might feel like it's pretty high, like maybe we have a good job, some good family members, whatever it is. But if this is the way that we're judging our value and worth, those things are all limited. Everything that you guys mentioned, they're all limited. And at some point, we'll find that needle pointing low. I don't know about you, but I've found sometimes it seems like other people judging me on their world's worthiness scale. Have you ever noticed that? Anyone ever had that? And if we're not careful, we have to look and make sure that we're not doing that with others. A few months ago, I was riding my bike in Eugene, and it's a university town, and I pedaled up to this college-age student, and I was at a red light, and it looked like his tire was almost flat. So I kind of went up to him and I said, hey, your tire's kind of low. Maybe you ought to go over and pump it up. Well, the light turned green. He kind of shrugged his shoulders, and off he went. And I found myself thinking, these lazy college kids these days. But Christian Science is a science. And we keep these ideas in any science. It's learning to keep these ideas in mind. And as we do that, that's when we see the impact that it has in our lives. So pretty quickly after kind of judging this guy on this world's worthiness scale, I thought, wait a minute, I'm judging this guy in the wrong way. It didn't take much. I just had to turn that around a little bit and say, his only value or worth is as the child of God. That's the only identity he has. So there's some pretty maybe subtle ways in which I think all of us, as we have a little self-examination, can check and see if we're judging others on this world's worthiness scale. Sometimes it might feel like we're the harshest critics of ourselves. We might look at that mirror and we just see the physical aspect of it. We don't see all those qualities of God that are lying underneath. We might look at that physical image and just say, I'm just not short enough. I'm just not strong enough. I'm just not tall enough. Just not wealthy enough. I say smart enough. Whenever we hear ourselves saying, I'm just not enough something, we can know that's because we're viewing ourselves incorrectly on that world's worthiness scale. And all we got to do is remember, oh yeah, I or this other person that we're having a hard time with, their nature is the child of God. That's who they are. And of course, every one of God's qualities is worthy. We have every one of God's qualities because we're God's effect. Christ Jesus saw this. He saw this unbreakable connection that everyone has with God. And he could so clearly see everyone's nature as a child of God that whatever is not godlike would fall away in that person. Someone who couldn't walk, someone who couldn't see, all the healings that he had, maybe some character issue. Jesus could see that has nothing to do with that person's true nature. And that's what allowed him to heal. So how does this kind of prayer, this kind of thinking, bring healing in our lives? How could a sort of a mental prayer bring about healing in our lives? Well, I have a little illustration I'd like to show you. And it sort of has to do with going to the park. Yep. Everyone know the Bijou Park? Most people know the Bijou Park right here in South Lake Tahoe. You guys want to go there? Let's say we go to the park tonight. Maybe the sun's just about setting. We all go there. And we have, a little meal. That's beautiful. Maybe we play on the swings a little bit. And then after that, we think, I want to go and maybe have a little quiet time. Maybe have a little Andrew Brewis on. A little quiet time. Well, when you first sit down, you can see everything clearly around you because it's light. But you get all absorbed in your thoughts, and pretty soon you kind of startle yourself awake, and things look a lot different in the dark. They might look distorted, even scary sometimes. And then you realize, hey, everyone left. And here you are in the park, in the dark, by yourself. And then as you're sitting there, you hear this little rustling over by the stump with the two little knots. And your fears and imaginations carry you away, and you look up, and you see some big red eyes looking at you. And this is just caused because you can't see very well. It's caused by your fear. So, how do you get rid of this bear that's caused by your not being able to see very well and by your thoughts and imagination? Throwing rocks at it, is that going to help? Nope. Does anyone know how to get rid of that? Flashlight, right. It's pretty well known everyone in South Lake Tahoe has a big old mag flashlight. And you just stick it up there, point it at that stump with the two little knots in it. Because that's all it's ever been. You didn't have to change anything. But you just saw God's goodness, God's reality more clearly right here. And that's the way that prayer brings about healing. It shines a light or understanding in our thoughts so we can just see just a little bit more clearly this unbreakable connection we all have with God's goodness. I've had a lot of healings through this kind of Christian Science prayer, financial, relationship, health issues. Later on today, Emra is going to share quite a few healings as well. But I want to share just one. So a few, maybe a year ago now, I was up in the high, or we might call it the high Oregon desert. And I was building this little brick patio. And I really wanted to get the bricks right up against the foundation. So I stuck my hand behind that cedar siding, and all of a sudden I felt this really sharp pain, and my hand just jerked down. And along with my hand fell a scorpion. Up here, it's too cold up here, right? But you know what scorpions are. They're very dangerous, very poisonous little bugger. And boy, does that hurt. It was kind of like, if you can go back, it was kind of like I was in the dark. One more forward. Where's the one with the eyes? Yep. It was kind of like at first I was in the dark. I was filled with fear. I'd heard from several other people who'd been stung by scorpions. And they told me first how much it hurt, and I could surely affirm that. They told me what they had done to try to remedy it. They told me the physical symptoms, the discoloration, the swelling. They told me how long it took and how they tried to find cure for it. So there I was back in the dark. But remember, this Christian science, a science is a study of something that we keep the ideas in mind. And then see how you can use them in your lives. It's kind of like, I was in agriculture a lot. I went to school in Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. Anyone know where that is? Great. Majored in agriculture. The actual title of my degree is crop science. So there was a science. And I'd study and learn about plants and crops and soils and how they all work together. And then after I graduated, I didn't just kind of keep those ideas as theory, but I would see how I could use them in my life. And that's the way that I see Christian science. Anyone can take these words and works of Christ Jesus, see how they can use them in their lives. Christ Jesus, so that's science, is studying, learning, keeping something in mind. Christianity is, as I see it, following those words and works of Christ Jesus, getting right to the source. And what did Christ Jesus say? To love one another as yourself. That's pretty hard to do, but it's something that we can work to attain. Christ Jesus also talked about how that kind of love for others and for ourselves is what brings healing. Love brings healing. So, there I was, and my finger really hurt. But I got this sense, because I kept these ideas in mind, that God, in God's infinite goodness and allness, would never create one idea or one thing that would harm something else. And all-loving, infinite God wouldn't do that. So I knew I must be just somehow seeing it wrong. I felt it was pretty serious, so I called what's called a Christian Science practitioner. That's someone who helps you pray to find solutions to problems. You know, I guess I could have taken some sort of pain medication, or I guess I could have gone to the emergency room, but I found Christian Science to be so effective that I was confident that I could be healed. So the practitioner was working for me, praying with me, and I was having this better sense of who I was with that unbreakable connection to God's goodness. So I thought, I'm not going to let this little bugger win. I'm going to go and finish what I meant to do. So I started laying bricks. Thought I'd put on a pair of leather gloves. Thought that might be a wise idea. I got all involved in what the pattern was. You know, when you do bricks, there's patterns that you make and everything. And after about 10 minutes, I thought, wait a minute. My finger doesn't hurt even one bit. Pulled off my glove. There was no mark. There was no discoloration. I couldn't even tell where I'd been stung by that scorpion. But boy, I know I had been, because it sure hurt. That's the power of this kind of Christian Science prayer that we're talking about. And I'm always so in awe when I have a healing like that, a quick healing like that, showing the allness and goodness of God, and not just for myself, but I know that anyone else can find healing in that same way. And you can see this kind of Christian Science prayer isn't just thinking good thoughts. I wasn't like, la-di-da-di-da, I'm going to be fine. Or trying to envision a perfect finger and then have it manifest. Christian Science prayer is recognizing the presence of God, that unbreakable connection that we have with God. That's the truth. We're just seeing the truth more clearly. And Christian scientists, or people who study these books, expect healing from their prayers. There's churches, Christian Science churches all around the world, many of them a little bit like this one here in South Lake Tahoe. They hold Wednesday meetings and Sunday services. In every one of those Wednesday meetings, there's a period of time set aside for people to share how they've been healed through this Christian Science method of healing. And it shows the reliability of this kind of prayer. And it shouldn't be any kind of a surprise. Christian Science is a discovery of the way that Jesus healed. Christian Science is a discovery of the way that Jesus healed. Jesus so clearly saw that unbreakable connection, that it brought healing. Well, Christian Science is a discovery of the way that Jesus healed. The discoverer's name is Mary Baker Eddy. If there was ever anyone who might have had reason to feel unneeded, unvaluable, unnecessary in the world, it could have been Mary Baker Eddy before she discovered Christian Science. You might remember she lived back in the 1800s. And we could take a snapshot of her life, say in the 1840s. Doesn't look like anyone probably remembers 1840s. So you'll have to kind of use your imagination. Imagine the life of a woman in the 1840s. She was in her 20s. She fell in love and got married, and that was really important back then because a woman really didn't have any other means of supporting themselves. About 6 months after that wedding, her husband caught yellow fever and died. And she was left not only single, but pregnant. Well, you know how hard it is for a single person today to raise a child? Imagine what it was like back in the 1840s for a woman. Does anyone know how much custodial rights a woman had to her own child back in the 1840s? Let's hear a number. 0. Yeah. She loved that boy. Really, he was all she had in her life. But other people decided maybe it would be best for that child to go and live with another family. She lost all track of him for many years, didn't even know if he was still alive. So here in a short period of time, she lost her husband, whom she dearly loved. And for all intents and purposes, her only child. Imagine how difficult it would be for a woman back then to support herself. She tried a lot of different things, but it's really tough. There was a short period of time where she just went from house to house, staying with whoever had the grace to let her stay with them. By today's standards, I think she would have been considered unhoused or homeless for that short period of time. She could easily have given up. She could easily have lost hope. But if there was one thing that Mary Baker Eddy had, it was determination, persistence. And she thought, if I could just heal this chronic illness, that would make things better in my life. She tried a lot of different medical systems at the time, didn't find any permanent healing. And all the while, she kept studying her Bible. She loved the Bible, grew up in a deeply Christian family. And at this point, it was especially those healings of Christ Jesus. How did he do it? How was he able to heal the way she did? And after lots of study and pondering and prayer, she came to realize that Jesus saw this unbreakable connection of cause and effect, God and every one of us. And he saw that so clearly that whatever was not godlike fell away. And she started to get this understanding, and she said, well, if it works for him, maybe this works for me. She offered to pray for some other people. Even though she was still ill herself, she offered to pray for others. And she found that she could heal them. So she knew she was on the right track of Jesus' commands to heal. Later on, she just could heal, bam, 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 just really quickly. If you haven't ever read a book lately, a biography of Mary Baker Eddy, get one out and look at all the accounts of healing that she had. I think it's probably a good idea to study and learn from someone who knows what they're doing. When I go to a hardware store, doing some self-improvement project, do you know what, when the person comes and asks me if they can help me, do you know what I ask them? Have you ever done this before? Because if they haven't done it, it's like, well, I could probably figure it out myself. Mary Baker Eddy did it. She did love. She did healing. And she was eventually cured of all that chronic illness she'd suffered from ever since she was young. If you can imagine that, to have suffered from something for all your life, searching for a solution, searching for hope, and to have finally found it, she just wanted to share it with the world. She had such a deep love for others. She didn't want anyone to suffer. So that's what caused her to write this book. And over again in different places, she rewrote it just to make it as clear as possible. So that future generations, any one of us, can have this clearest sense of God, infinite good, infinite love, ever-present Spirit, and each of us as that emanation of God. Now, the Bible talks a lot about prayer, as I'm sure you know. I like to go directly to what Christ Jesus says. If you haven't read Matthew 5, 6, and 7, take a look at those. He talks about not only how to pray, but how to live that Christian life that brings healing. One of the things he said was, go into a quiet place. Close the door. You know, if we're having a hard time thinking of our value or worth, or if we're having a hard time with a family member, we're kind of wondering, what are they doing? What's their value and worth? Or a friend, a neighbor, the guy or gal under a bridge. We just need to get this clear sense of reality, of who we really are. And Mary Baker Eddy talks a lot about prayer in this book. As a matter of fact, the first 17 pages, the title of that chapter is Prayer. It's only 17 pages. If you haven't read it in a while, get it out and read it. I don't have time to necessarily explain hardly anything of what's in this book. But I do want to share one slide, one passage about healing and what brings here. And you might think of the bear in the woods or the bear in the park. She says, it is our ignorance of God, the divine principle, which produces apparent discord, and the right understanding of him restores harmony. So there's that ignorance, right? The light's not on. We're seeing things incorrectly. We're not seeing God's all goodness. God has infinite spirit. We're somehow seeing that, we're believing that matter is somehow a part of God's creation. Matter can't be a part of God's creation at all. Like produces like. I'm sure in the fall you guys have some really beautiful leaves. Those What kind of trees are those? What is it? Aspen? Oh, yeah, aspens. Well, a couple of weeks ago, my wife and I were in Toronto, and it was maybe a month ago now, there was a bunch of maple trees. Did you know that maple trees are pretty common in Canada? Maple trees. But interspersed in with those maple trees were fir trees. Now, the fir needles, of course, were out because they stay out all year round. And I was kind of looking at those maple leaves, and they were like full bud. They were just ready to burst out. And I kind of wondered, I wonder what these leaves are going to look like. And then this kind of absurd thought came to me. I thought, I wonder if any of these maple leaves will come out as a fir tree or a fir needle. I mean, like a whole branch of fir needles. That might seem kind of preposterous. Wouldn't you all say? These trees were like mixed together. So as I looked up higher, it was kind of hard to tell where that branch came from. But I was pretty sure those firs came from a fir tree. Not even one. Not even one fir needle can come from a maple tree. Not even one ungodlike quality can be a part of us because like produces like. God's entirely good, so our nature is entirely good. So it's our ignorance of God, the divine principle. When I think of divine principle, I think of the foundation, the source of all there is. Or you might say, we've been talking a lot about cause. That's a source. It's our ignorance that God is our source, which produces apparent discord. And in that right understanding of God restores harmony. Just like shining that flashlight, getting that right understanding, just a little bit clearer, just a little more clear understanding of God's reality of goodness. Well, you might notice that this talk today is called Why Everyone is Needed. It's not like, why am I needed? And not you or everybody else or that other political party or that other country. Why everyone is needed. And I hope that you see it's because everyone is the child of God. I find that sometimes easy to think, yeah, I know everyone's the child of God. But then what happens when that person plays their music really loud next door? Sometimes we don't see them quite that way. And that's our job, because that's who they really are. And that includes people with different backgrounds, people with different points of view, people with conflicting interests. It even includes people who we might think are a threat. I feel like I hear that a lot. This side or that side, they're a threat. This person or that person, they're a threat. That doesn't mean we just accept or allow ungodlike thoughts or actions. We go back to Christ Jesus. Love. We just love. But if we're not going to view others for who they really are, who's going to? Have you ever thought maybe some world problem was maybe too big for your prayers? Honestly now, has anyone ever felt that way? I know I have. We'll have a final little healing to share with you that shows how our prayers can have an impact on others. It might be family members, maybe family members that we love that are going the wrong way. There's a man I know who grew up with an abusive, alcoholic dad. When he was in his early teens, the dad just up and left, never came back. And as time went on, he began to dislike his father more and more. He could feel that resentment kind of building up. Pretty soon, whatever was going on in his life, whatever bad happened, he'd blame it on his dad because he felt he hadn't been trained in the way that a good dad would train you. Then one day, he discovered this book, Science and Health, with Key to the Scriptures. It reminded him that he had a Bible, so he went and dusted off his Bible, and he started to read them. He learned lots of things about the nature of God and God's all goodness. But one thing he found especially helpful was a sense of God's parenthood. He got a better sense of God's parenthood. He realized, gosh, if God's infinite spirit, infinite love, and everywhere, if God has his wing spread out over me like that mother bird, then I've always had good in my life. Even if it didn't always seem like it, I've always had that good from God. Pretty soon he realized, if I've always had God's goodness in my life, if it's not dependent upon my dad, then I can't blame my dad for anything that's gone wrong in my life. One specific night, he still remembers that night, he had an epiphany. That's the biggest word I know, so I like to use it when I can. He had an epiphany. He realized that he was really discovering this allness of God, his infinite love and infinite spirit, as all good. He was better able to view himself as that effect of God, with that unbreakable connection to God. And he was viewing his dad as an alcoholic. It doesn't work. There can't be one person in our lives. So we probably all have people that we kind of question. Maybe when you get in bed tonight, think about if there's ever anyone that you think is not worthy of God or isn't God's child. Think differently. That's what brings progress. That's what brings healing. He kind of forgot about this epiphany. That's 3 times I've used it. This epiphany that he had. 4. And about 2 months later, now this is before there were like Google searches and all that stuff. About 2 months later, he gets a call on his landline, and guess who it is? Yeah, his dad. Some people are listening, great. It was his dad. And his dad said, guess what, son? You wouldn't believe it. About 2 months ago, I was lying down by the river, feeling like such a bum. You can imagine how hopeless that man must have felt, maybe guilty for having left his family for all those years, just burning up with guilt. That's not helpful either. Anyway, down there, lying by the river, when all of a sudden, it was as if the fog lifted in my thinking. And the thought came to me, you don't ever have to have a drink again. God's always talking to us. That prayer that Jesus talked about, getting quiet. He was getting quiet and he heard. You don't ever have to have a drink again. And then he said to his son, and you know what? I haven't had one. And it's been 2 months. And he said, I think you had something to do with it. Well, they reunited their friendship, or maybe just started a friendship. I'm not sure. Yeah, they didn't really ever have one before, but they got a friend for like next 20 years. His dad, who was healed of that alcoholism, wanted to give back. So he started to help out with different organizations, helping with abuse and addiction. So think about that for a minute. What that one man's, I don't even know if it's prayer, really just thinking of his dad, just more clearly. I guess we can call that prayer. Just that one short, brief little thing. It helped that young man. He was harboring that resentment or hatred against his dad. That's never a good thing. When we think, go to bed at night tonight, if there's anyone that we're harboring that resentment, get rid of it. It doesn't help you out. So it helped the son out. It helped the father. He no longer had that addiction. And think of all the people his father helped out of addiction through those different organizations. I think it's like a pebble in the pond effect, that one little prayer. So if you ever think, this problem's too big, this person's too bad, too evil, think about this example and know that our prayers can have an impact. For me, I really can't, if there's someone I'm having a hard time getting along with, especially someone who seems really, really bad, it's pretty hard for me to look at the silver lining. Say, oh, he's done this, but, he is this or that. That's not Christian Science, looking at the silver lining. Christian Science is looking at the person for who they really are. Start with God. When you think of this awful whomever, start with God. Whatever that goodness, that joy, that harmony, that God expresses, know that has to be expressed, because every cause has to have an effect. Well, I hope you can see that this world's worthiness scale, hope you're not taking one of those home with you. You can just kick those out. None of those ideas we talked about had anything to do with our true value and worth. What does God care about? How much money we have, or how important we think we are, or how busy we are? And how long does God have a need for us? How long does this cause need us as that special effect? Forever. Way past our time here on earth, God will always have that need for us. So our value and worth can never grow old, can never diminish, can never retire. We'll always be needed just as much as we've ever been. Well, I hope this talk today, and certainly we'll hear from Emra a lot more ideas, but I hope that, this isn't just like a nice little inspirational. Yeah, I heard some good ideas, but Christianity is a doing. Science is a doing. So take these ideas and do them. Do that love. Do that healing. View everyone for who they really are as the child of God. Well, I think that's about a wrap. Thank you all. Thank you those online. And we'll see you in a little bit.
Thank you, James. Whoa, thank you, James. Some people say I don't talk loud enough, so. We're going to take a short break. There's some refreshments back in the Sunday school room you saw, and while we're doing that, Andrew's going to play so that we can compress some time and get on with part 2. So have a happy break, and we'll see you back here soon.
Spiritually uplifted by the talks that we've heard this afternoon. I know I have been and continue to be inspired by the words of Mary Baker Eddy, the discoverer and founder of Christian Science, and at events like this South Lake Tahoe summit. And that it's good to know that we're all on that journey, on that road on progress and healing, and that we are all needed in that journey with God. So once again, thank you for having me. I'm going to send you home with a few more healing, I hope, songs. Oh, dreamer, leave your dreams for joyful waking. Oh, captive, rise and sing, for you are free. The Christ is here, our dreams of error breaking, unloosing bonds of all captivity. Love comes to give you joy for desolation, beauty for ashes of the vanished years, for every tear to bring full compensation, to give you confidence, confidence for all your fears. He comes to bless you on his wings of healing, to banish pain, wipe all tears away. He comes anew to humble hearts, revealing the mounting footsteps of the upward way. Love comes to call the dumb to joyful singing, the deaf to hear, and the blinded eyes to see. The glorious tidings of salvation bringing. O captive, rise, thy Savior comes to thee. Love comes to call the dumb to joyful singing, the deaf to hear, and the blinded eyes to see, blinded eyes to see the glorious tidings of salvation bringing. O captive, rise, for love has set you free. O captive, rise, for love has set you free. O captive, rise, for love has set you free. The light fades fast, and the night is closing in, and I feel the weight of the day that's been. But through the dark, I hear you call my name, a whisper strong, love that stays the same. When shadows rise and I feel that hope is gone, I find my strength where you belong. Oh, stay with me, don't let me go. Through every high and every low, stay with me, don't let me go. Through every high and every low, through every rise and every fall, you're my constant through it all. You're the one thing, You're the one thing that will last. Stay with me, my heart won't fear. Through every storm, I know that you are near. Through every tear, you're all I see. I know you'll always be here with me. Stay with me, don't let me go. Through every high and every low, and the world is changing fast. You're the one thing that will last. Through the fire and through the rain, where the old ways turn to dust, still your love remains the same. From the first breath to the last, you're the one thing. You're the one thing. You're the one thing that will last. You're the one thing. You're the one thing that will last.
See, I'm trusting. I empty my pockets and lay them on the table.
Oh my gosh, cash and all.
One flock, one voice, one love that carries me home. One flock, one voice, one love that carries me home. No separation, no one knows. I hear you, I follow you, I know where I stand, safe in the shepherd's hand. One flock, one voice, one love that carries me home. One voice, one flock, one love that carries me home. My shepherd, he is love divine. I am not afraid. Every voice that speaks of fear is already overruled, undone, unmade. One flock, one voice, one love that carries me home. One flock, one voice, one love that carries me home, that carries me home. I and the Father one. I and my Father one. In that voice of love I live, in all that love has done. In the voice of love I live, in all that love, in all that love has done. One flock, one voice, one love that carries me home. One flock, one voice, one love that carries me home. I and the Father one. I and the Father one. In the voice of love I live, in all that love, in all that love, in all that love has done. Well, I'm going to send you home with a poem by William Luce, a wonderful, great American poem writer and lyric writer. Lyric writer or music writer? Lyric writer, yes. He was a playwright, and he wrote this poem called "This Is the Time to Pray." It's always the time to pray, isn't it, really? But I think particularly at the moment, in the seeming distress there seems to be in the world. So I send you out with peace and love and joy, and just remember, it's always time to pray. This is the time when the world must pray to hear the Father's call. This is the time to break down each wall and free us, one and all. This is the time to forget the past, to find a better way. This is the time when heart meets heart. This is the time. This is the time to pray. This is the time to be strong and bold, to fight for what is right. This is the time for a song of joy to end the lonely night. This is the time for the clouds of strife to fade and melt away. This is the time for light and love. This is the time to pray. This is the time when the world must pray to hear the Father's call. This is the time to break down each wall and free us, one and all. This is the time to forget the past, to find a better way. This is the time. This is the time to pray. This is the time when the streams of hope must overflow the land. This is the time to put all your faith into the Father's hand. This is the time to make war and hate the dreams of yesterday. This is the time to pray, the time to pray. This is the time when the world must pray to hear the Father's call. This is the time to break down each wall and free us, one and all. This is the time to forget the past, to find a better way. This is the time when heart meets heart. This is the time, yes, this is the time to pray. this is the time. This is your time to pray.
Chloe, am I on now? Am I on now? No, she's the backup mic. And the backup mic is working? No. Does it work in stereo? This one's working? Before we go, no? That one's working? Doesn't sound like, there, now it is. I'll keep that one. Before we go to part 2, there have been some feedback that we've received, and some from our members as well, that maybe Memorial Day weekend isn't the best time to draw a crowd. But you're all here today, and some of you have been here for 12 years. So we're going to do a little survey, a simple survey. There's white cards in your chair that you don't have to fill them out now, but fill them out before you leave. And there's going to be 2 questions. The first question is Memorial Day weekend still good for you? If it is, yes, that's all you need to say. If it isn't, write no, and then give us a suggestion what you think might be a better time. That's all we ask. And now Cindy has something to share with us.
So this is a question whether or not you'd be interested in this. I've been talking to the managing editor of the Christian Science Monitor. And for those of you that are new to the Monitor, it is one of the few independent newspapers left in the country. It's international. And its goal is to injure no man, but to bless all mankind. And so they cover stories that are of, imminent interest, but give you all the facts so that you can make your own decision as to what you think should be done or is going on. So I've been speaking to her, and she is willing to come to South Lake Tahoe later this summer or early fall, and but she needs to have at least 100 people to make it worth the Monitor's while for her to depart Boston. So the second question you have on your little card is that something and that you would be willing to come for? And if you're online, is that something that you would be willing to tune into? So that's the number 2 question. And we're so grateful that you're here today.
And for those of you online, we will use MailChimp and send out a question so that you can respond that way for those of you that aren't here. And the other constraint is there's 72 chairs in here right now. So imagine 25 more, 27 more, whatever, 28 more. Yes, Charlene. If that other church would be interested in hosting it, sure. So that's kind of where we are.
Yeah, I've already been in touch with her.
So. No.
Yes, it would. Yes.
Oh, I didn't understand that. Thanks for asking that question. Oh, okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am? You can just leave them laying on the chair and we'll collect them. Today. Mm-hmm. Thank you. Did you put that on your card? All right. Thank you. Then we'll remember it. I don't think I mentioned when I introduced James that he is in the full-time practice of Christian Science. You probably all already knew that, but I don't think I said it. So that's a post fact. I would now like to introduce you to Miss Caryl Emra Farkas, who is from Santa Fe, New Mexico, who has had her sleep shortened because of an airline delay between Santa Fe and Reno, which is a story we've all heard before. She has prepared for us another bit of topic to consider in our smorgasbord of ideas as we go through these spiritual summits. And it's with great pleasure that I welcome Emra to the stage. And I stole your backup mic.
Thank you, Joe. And thanks to all the members of First South Lake Tahoe and the tech crew back there and everybody online. The topic of my talk is, can prayer be scientific? This is something I started to think about quite a while ago. I started to think about this when I was 14. And the reason I started to think about it was that I had just started high school, and a teacher at my new school asked me if I would come and explain my religion, Christian Science, to her social studies class. And I was a freshman. I felt excited. I felt very honored. I put a lot of time into figuring out how to boil down everything I'd learned in Sunday school, everything I'd experienced growing up in Christian Science, to my 15-minute window of time. And I thought, well, I should probably start with the importance to Christian scientists of Genesis 1. And that's the first chapter of the first book in the Bible, where it says that God made everything, and behold, it was very good. And this is also the place where it says that we are made in the image and likeness of God. So we are always included in that goodness. And then I thought, well, I should say something about that essential Christian teaching that God is love. Jesus taught that God is like a loving, caring parent who is always providing for us. And then I thought I could talk about how prayer that starts from this understanding of God as ever-present goodness and love that includes us brings transformation, brings healing. It's practical, it's provable. And then I thought I could back that up by sharing some of the experiences of healing that I had had when I had prayed this way growing up, and I had had many. The fact that I could even be standing in front of that classroom at all was because of this kind of prayer in Christian Science. My mother had tried for 16 years to have a child, and she'd suffered multiple miscarriages, and then there'd been an ectopic pregnancy, at which point the doctors told her, you are incapable of carrying a pregnancy to term and delivering a healthy child. And it was right on the heels of this very dismaying news that a coworker, who was a Christian Scientist, invited my mother to church. And my mother was not a church-going person. But there was something about this woman. Maybe it was her enthusiasm, her joy. My mother was inspired to accept the invitation. She went to church. She liked what she heard. She met a Christian Science practitioner there, and as you heard, this is somebody who has experienced this kind of healing through prayer and has now dedicated their time and energy to helping others have that experience. She asked the practitioner to pray for her. The practitioner agreed, and she told my mother about that ever-present goodness that included her, God's love that included her. She said that this was the truth that Jesus was talking about that liberates us. He shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. This is that truth, that we are never separated from God's love and goodness. My mother got a copy of Science and Health with Key to the Scriptures by Mary Baker Eddy. She started reading it. It changed her life. she started living more and more from this basis that God's love is actually here, that the goodness that she was seeking was already present. And as she did this, wonderful things happened. She was able to heal my father of a worrisome growth on his neck. She shared what she was learning with her sister. Her sister experienced physical healing. At the end of the year, she had carried a successful pregnancy to term and delivered a healthy baby, and that was me. So I literally owe my life to this understanding of prayer in Christian Science. After I was born, the members of this church that my mother had joined made me a little gift. It's a glass locket in the shape of a heart, has a mustard seed in it. I've still got it. Because Jesus said that nothing was impossible to faith, even as small as a mustard seed. And that's certainly been my experience, that even just catching a glimpse of the reality of the presence of God's love and that goodness has a transforming effect on our lives. Makes us aware of good that we hadn't known was there. So this idea that our well-being can dependably be found through a deeper understanding of what God is and what God is doing, that love that is always there, that goodness that includes us, that was not on anybody's radar at the social studies class. And this became apparent very quickly when I got there. The teacher said there were going to be 2 presentations that day, mine and a film, and I would go second, so I should sit in the back and wait my turn. And then she flipped on this kind of grainy black and white movie of a meeting where people were passing around poisonous snakes and calling on God for protection. And that's when I realized my understanding of prayer, my understanding of God was nothing like that. And that very likely it was the teacher's expectation that it was exactly like that. So at that point I had like 12 minutes to revise my comments. I thought, I'm going to have to say something about this difference in my understanding of prayer. Prayer in Christian Science is not blind faith. It's not trying to think good thoughts and hope they come true. It's not asking a cosmic judge to be kind to us or pleading with a disconnected creator to come down and intervene and fix the broken and flawed parts of his creation. Prayer in Christian Science, it starts with what God is and what God is doing. So how do we do that? Well, God's nature can be found in the expression of those qualities that reveal that love and goodness, that express that love and goodness: humanity, hope, compassion, honesty. I mean, these are all spiritual qualities. Can't see them with your eyes. You can't hold them with your hands. You know they're real. You know them when you encounter them. And you know that it's these qualities that are behind every fine thing humanity has ever accomplished. So, starting with the reality of those qualities, the presence of those qualities, responding to them, insisting on them, instead of reacting to whatever the material conditions are, feeling trapped by the limitations of those, struggling with those. There was a Christian Science teacher, and this is somebody who gives a 2-week class to those who are interested in deepening their understanding of how spiritual healing works. Used to ask his students, if you were down a deep hole, would you prefer to be extricated using material or spiritual means? And of course, because they were all there to learn about spiritual healing, the students said, spiritual means. At which point he told them it's a trick question. You never start with the pit. You never start with the problem. You always start with God. You start with what God is and what God is doing right there. And suddenly there is inspiration that you had not been aware of. There are answers, solutions that you had not imagined. There is good present that you had not seen before. And that was certainly the kind of prayer that had healed me when I was a child of mumps and measles and chicken pox and ringworm, a gashed leg from a riding accident, an almost entirely severed thumb when I was about 4 or 5 for reasons still passing my understanding. My dad had just built this swing set in our backyard, and I thought it would be a good idea to climb up on top of the slide and stick my finger in the mechanism of the glider swing. So my friends were in the swing, and the swing came back, and it went right through my thumb, right through the bone, and I ran screaming into the house. And my mom was on the porch. She saw what happened, and she whipped a handkerchief out of her house dress and started wrapping it around my hand. And as she's doing this, she's singing a hymn that I knew from Sunday school about the gentle presence of God's love, the power of that love. And as she's singing, the fear, the terror, the pain just drains away. And I felt myself to be in the care of that love. So this is maybe 90 seconds has elapsed, and my dad comes pounding down the driveway because one of my friends has gone and told him what happened. My dad was not a Christian Scientist, and he hurried us into the car. He said he was going to call ahead to the doctor's office. We should get there right away. It was only 3 blocks down the road. My mom's still singing the hymn. We get up to the doctor's, and the nurse is waiting for us out on the lawn. She rushes us into the examination room, and the doctor cuts the bloody handkerchief off my hand, and there's not a mark on my hand. And he stood there for a moment, and he looked at the bloody handkerchief, and he looked at my hand, and he looked at my mother. He said, "You can go home." This was not the first time we had been in his office on the pretext of some calamity that turned out to be not a calamity at all. Sometimes healings came fast, like that, really fast. Sometimes they took more time. But in any case, I was motivated to deal with problems through prayer, not just because I knew that there was an assured outcome, but because of the way it felt when I did it. When I was around 9, it was winter break, and I was homesick in bed with a cold, and all my friends were going to go sledding, and I was very grumpy about that. And my mom came in with a cup of soup, and she said, "Are you praying?" I don't remember exactly what my answer was, but really the answer was no, because I was too busy feeling, pity for myself. She didn't say anything. She left the soup, and she went out, and she came back in with this portable record player, which she put on my dresser, and then she put on an album of hymns. And my first thought was, I don't want to listen to hymns, but I also didn't want to get out of bed. So by about the 3rd track, I think it was the 3rd track was the Lord's Prayer. And something in the singer's voice, or the melody, or the words themselves, suddenly made me feel as if I was in the world behind those words. I was in that world of Our Father. And the room literally changed. I remember it suddenly feeling warm and just full of sunlight on this gray winter day. And I remember distinctly having the thought, oh my gosh, this is what's true all the time. This is what's going on all the time. Well, the cough and the sore throat and the sniffles went away, and I got to go out sledding with my friends. I don't remember anything about the sledding. I'll never forget that moment of seeing the reality of God's love, knowing that is reality. And I knew that other members of my church had had this experience too, because I would go with my mother to church on Wednesday evenings. And James talked a little bit about Wednesday nights. There's hymns, there's readings from the Bible and Science and Health on some topic of relevance to the community. And then people stand up and they share what happened to them when they had prayed this way. And all of these testimonies have the same basic narrative arc. They all start with a problem. Someone will stand up and say, there was this problem. It was big, it was scary, it seemed insurmountable, I didn't know what I was going to do. And then prayer enters the equation, and they talk about how they prayed. They talk about those spiritual qualities that they recognized were present, that they insisted were there, that they cherished, that they made an effort to express. And then comes this moment where they talk about how they suddenly realize that the problem, whatever it was, is just nothing compared to the reality of what God is doing and what God is right there. And you can hear, the awe, the gratitude, the enthusiasm in their voice, and then sometimes they just sit down. And then a few minutes later, they'll stand back up and they'll say, oh, I'm so sorry, I forgot to mention, the rash went away. And I could see that for them, as well as for me, that the biggest part of this experience was that revelation of what is really going on, the reality of God's love. So, turns out my 15 minutes with the class went really well. Probably because right before I stood up, I remembered that the qualities that I was going to need for a successful presentation, the discernment, the understanding, the perception, the wisdom, those spiritual qualities were already there. I wasn't going to have to create them. They were already there, and I could respond to them, and I could express them. So it went so well, in fact, that I was asked back for all 3 of the years that I was at that school, and every year it was the same. They'd turn out the lights, and there were the snakes, and then I'd stand up and the teacher would introduce me, and somebody every year would say, you're the people who don't believe in doctors. And then I would share this different understanding of prayer, and I would talk about what prayer is like in Christian Science, and then I'd share some of those healings. And I think at that point, everybody could see that it wasn't a matter of believing in doctors or not believing in doctors. If you've had an experience like this is going to be your first stop whenever something comes up that's challenging. And then there'd be this pivot in the questions. And they started to become, is this something I can do? How do you do this? Can anybody do this? I mean, those are the questions. Those are the questions you would ask if you had encountered this kind of healing or you'd heard about it. Looks like some of you might be able to remember back in the 90s, there were a number of studies on the efficacy of prayer. These were medical studies. There were a lot of them. I mean, I think the reason there were a lot of them is that doctors had seen with their own patients that prayer made a positive difference, and they wanted to know why. And so they set up these studies in hospitals. There'd be a control group of people who were prayed for and a group who were not prayed for, and over, the people who were prayed for did better. There was one case where the people who were prayed for did worse. And in that study, they had been told ahead of time that they were going to be prayed for, and apparently they felt so much pressure to perform for the prayers that they stressed themselves out. But I think that study really tells us more about human psychology than it does about prayer or God. Well, you don't really hear about these studies anymore. And I think the reason is that the doctors, the scientists weren't getting the answers that they hoped they would get. But if you have ever conducted a scientific experiment, if you've ever gone through a 7th grade science class, you know that the first thing you have to do, you have to define your terms. You can't say, Well, I poured a beaker of mystery fluid into this other beaker of mystery fluid and expect to get a consistent result. Well, none of those prayer studies defined God, defined prayer, defined faith. So it's not really surprising that they didn't get the kinds of answers that they were looking for. So even though those studies didn't define their terms, happily, we are able to see what it would look like if those terms were defined. Because Jesus defined those terms. You can look at the first 40 years of the Christian movement effectively as a prayer study on the effect of prayer on healing. I'm just going to share a quote with you from Marcus Borg. Borg was a member of the Jesus Project. It was that group of scholars who were trying to determine which of Jesus' sayings were closer to being historically accurate. So he's bringing sort of a scholarly, skeptical, academic view to this. But he writes of Jesus, he was a remarkable healer. More healing stories are told about him than anybody else in the Jewish tradition, and any sketch of Jesus with a claim to historical credibility must account for this fact. You have to account for the healings. You might say that Christian Science is a science in which Jesus has already performed all the critical experiments. And his healings prove the accuracy of his teachings. Some of you may know Thomas Jefferson took his Bible and he cut all the healings out. He called the ethical teachings of Jesus the diamond of the Gospels, and he called the healings pious fabrications. The thing is, though, the healings are the proofs of the teachings, and you can't separate them. So let's look for a moment at those teachings and how Jesus defined those terms, and then how that understanding was the basis for his healing work. He defined God. Right? God is love. God is that loving, caring parent who is always there for us. He defined prayer. He gave us the Lord's Prayer that starts with Our Father. He told his disciples, when you pray, he said, go into your closet. That's the way the King James Version puts it. I remember being really little and actually going into my closet just to see if it was different in there. That wasn't the kind of closet that he meant. The King James translation, that word closet really just means like a small private space, your private room, away from everything else. If you look at the original Greek of the New Testament, the word for closet or private room is tameion. And that has another layer of meaning. It means storehouse. So this is not an empty closet, empty space. It's a place that is full. It's full of those spiritual qualities that you can respond to, that you can connect with, that you can commune with. So those qualities that Jesus said we should pay attention and express, they're not just ethical icing on the cake of a material life. They are life itself. Remember his saying that faith, even a tiny amount of faith could reveal a completely different experience. So I want to look at just one of the 37 accounts of healing in the Gospels and see how those terms and that understanding made that healing possible. I'm going to pick a short one. This is the healing of the 10 lepers from Luke. So in this account, Jesus is at a village gate. There are 10 lepers standing afar off. They cry to Jesus for mercy. He tells them to go show themselves to the priests, the people who have the authority to say, you are healed, you can come back into society. They go. On the way, they are healed, and one comes back and gives thanks to God. So just to unpack this happens at a busy place, a village gate. There are merchants, there are people coming and going. The lepers are standing far off. Why? Because nobody wants anything to do with them. Everybody knows they're contagious. Everybody also thinks they know that those men must have done something wrong because they have leprosy on account of their wrongdoing. God cursed them. That's why they have leprosy. So they're looked upon not only with fear, I don't want a piece of that, but with loathing. Now, Jesus is not looking at them this way. He is seeing something different. And his response is completely different. I love Mary Baker Eddy's description of how Jesus saw. She wrote, Jesus beheld in science, in knowledge, in understanding, the perfect man, who appeared to him where sinning mortal man appears to mortals. In this perfect man, the Savior saw God's own likeness. There's that echo of Genesis 1. And this correct view of man healed the sick. So to put it simply, Jesus saw what God was, what God was doing, right where the lepers seemed to be, and then the leprosy wasn't. This is what St. Paul called having the mind of Christ. Right? That understanding of God's always present love that heals. So going back to my classmate's question, can anybody do this? Is Jesus a special case? Well, what you see in the book of Acts, the next 40 years of the Christian movement after Jesus, is you see lots of healing on this same prayerful basis. For example, Peter goes to Joppa, this little Christian community that's in mourning because they've just lost one of their members. And Peter brings with him the mind of Christ. So when he gets there and everybody's weeping and grieving and showing him the coats and the clothing that this woman Dorcas, also called Tabitha, was making for the widows and orphans in that community, he has them bring him to where the body is, and then he puts them out of the room because he wants to go into that closet of prayer. And he doesn't want to bring the mourners in with him. He wants to be in that storehouse of spiritual qualities that tell us what's really going on. Now, we don't know exactly how Peter prayed. That's not in the account. But I think it's safe to assume that his prayer must have been based in what Jesus had taught about love's power and perpetual presence. So when Peter reaches the realization that this and this alone is real, he calls on the woman to get up, and she does. And then all the mourning turns to rejoicing. And the book of Acts is just full of accounts like this. There's a British evangelical scholar named Michael Green who wrote a book, 30 Years That Changed the World. And in it he said that those early Christians had a won't shut up about it mindset. They were literally going door to door. They were knocking on doors and saying, this just happened. There was this healing. This happened to me. They wouldn't shut up about it. And so this paradigm shifting, completely different way to think is spreading, and it's spreading like wildfire. So I think you have to ask yourself, what happened? Where did it go? Well, about 300 years in, the Emperor Constantine declares Christianity to be the official religion of the Roman Empire, and overnight you've got thousands of brand new Christians who have no idea what that means. And now the emphasis shifts from being one of personal transformation, from that eye to eye, the greeting flows, to being institutional. The list of boxes to check to affirm that you are a Christian. The creed, I believe, I believe, I believe. And the healing begins to diminish. It doesn't completely disappear, but it lessens. Well, it is this original sense of God as the reality of everything that Mary Baker Eddy uncovers in her discovery of Christian Science in 1866. That this understanding is timeless. It is true for all time. I just want to give you a sense of how her contemporaries saw her. This is a quote from Clara Barton, the woman who started the Red Cross. She said, "Love permeates all the teachings of this great woman. So great, I believe, that at this perspective we can scarcely realize how great." And looking into her history, we see nothing but self-sacrifice and selflessness. And then this is from Mark Twain. He said, "When we do not know a person, and also when we do, we have to judge his size by the size and nature of his achievements, as compared with the achievements of others in his special line of business. There is no other way. Measured by this standard, it is 1,300 years since the world has produced anyone who could reach up to Mrs. Eddy's waist belt. In several ways, she is the most interesting woman that ever lived, and the most extraordinary." So she's born in 1821, as James was saying, in a family with great faith. It's a pious family in a pious part of the world. She's got a father who's sort of a strict Calvinist. Her mother's theology is warmer. It's the theology of love, which Mary responds to. She has an older brother, Albert, who went to Dartmouth. And because Mary was a sickly child who did not always make it to school, when Albert was home on his breaks, he would share his Ivy League education with his little sister. And so he taught her some Greek and some Latin and some Hebrew. She said her favorite studies were natural philosophy, logic, and moral science. So here is someone from even an early age who has great faith, but also a rational questioning mind. So she experiences healing as a child when she prays from the basis of the presence of God's love. And she begins to question that rigid Calvinist theology of her father. As an adult, her search for better health leads her to question the medical theories of the day. So her explorations were truly scientific. She questioned current beliefs. She questioned the opinions of others, even when they came with great authority. She wanted practical proof. In her experiments with homeopathy, she began to explore the role that thought played in healing and question, what kind of thought is it that heals? So I'm going to jump to 1864. She's in Maine. She's staying at the home of a woman named Mary Ann Jarvis. And Miss Jarvis has got some kind of lung condition that makes it hard for her to breathe. On some occasions, this is so bad that she can't get her breath at all. And during one of these episodes, Mary Baker Eddy sits by her bedside and gives what she calls a metaphysical treatment. And I'll talk about that in a moment, but as she gives this metaphysical treatment, Ms. Jarvis's breath gentles, it becomes normal. When she gets up later, she has no trouble breathing and the attacks never come back. A few months later, she's staying with another woman, and they're still up in Maine, Sarah Crosby. One day, Sarah Crosby goes to get down a big jar of vitriolic acid that's on a high shelf. What could go wrong? The jar slips, it breaks, the acid spills all over her. A doctor is called. The doctor says this may prove fatal. There's nothing that can be done. Sarah Crosby calls for her friend Mary to come and pray, and she does. Sarah Crosby goes to bed. Mary Baker Eddy gives another one of these metaphysical treatments. 2 hours later, Sarah Crosby gets up, and there's no sign of the acid burns, and the pain is gone. And that's the end of that. Now, we all know what physical treatment is. Physical treatment starts with and works with material conditions. It works with what the eye can see. metaphysical treatment. Well, metaphysics, as defined by Aristotle, is the science of mind or intelligence. So metaphysical treatment is going to start with and work with thought. It works with ideas, the reality and presence of those spiritual qualities. And I think if you consider this, we treat our thought all the time. We are all constantly treating our thought. The only question is, what are we treating it with? So for example, if you were driving through town today and you passed a stoplight and there was a person on the median with a cardboard sign that said, "Please help me," I promise you in that moment you were treating your thought. So the conventional treatments of thought in that moment might be, "Oh, that poor person. I feel so sorry for them." Or it might be, "Boy, the village really, they need to get on top of this. This is terrible." Or, "That could be me." Reacting to what you see with sorrow, with anger, with fear. Those are the conventional modes of thought. Christian Science calls that mortal mind. It's what St. Paul called the carnal mind. Interestingly, Paul said the carnal mind is enmity against God. In other words, it resists the very notion of the presence of God's goodness and love. So, are you accepting those reactions as appropriate? Or are you challenging them? Are you considering the possibility perhaps that you too can behold in a deeper understanding of what's going on, what God is doing right where that person is? So this is, it's true whether you're driving through town or whether you've just opened the news in the morning. There's plenty of reasons to react there, plenty of reasons to be sad or mad or scared. But again, there is a great value in questioning that reaction. So those events in Maine really helped make apparent to Mary Baker Eddy that there are powerful spiritual qualities that are always present. They are perceivable. And the need is to find a way to think and act in accord with what God is and what God is doing, instead of just continually reacting, and instead of that sort of hamster wheel of being sad and mad and scared. And again, she was doing this in a truly scientific way. She said, "My conclusions were reached by allowing the evidence of this revelation to multiply with mathematical certainty, and the lesser demonstration to prove the greater, as the product of 3 multiplied by 3 equaling 9 proves conclusively that 3 times 3 duodecillions must be 9 duodecillions, not a fraction more, not a unit less." So when 2 years later in 1866, she has a profound experience of God's love and goodness, and this connects with everything she had learned about thought and well-being, everything she had learned about God through that constant companionship with her Bible, it leads to a discovery, and I'm going to let her put it in her own words. This is from her autobiography, Retrospection and Introspection. She said, "My immediate recovery from the effects of an injury caused by an accident, an injury that neither medicine nor surgery could reach, was the falling apple that led me to the discovery how to be well myself and how to make others so. I then withdrew from society about 3 years to ponder my mission, to search the scriptures, to find the science of mind." And she wasn't just sitting at home. During those 3 years, this is just a short list, healed a child with club feet, a case of dislocated hip, a man who was about to have an infected finger amputated. I think that's my favorite because she heard about what was happening. He was already in the vestibule waiting for a carriage to take him to the surgeon. She arrived and asked if he would allow her to pray, and he said, "Well, be quick about it." And she was. And then he didn't need to get into that carriage to go to the surgeon. She healed a child's deafness, cases of enteritis, fever, sciatica, tuberculosis, a case of pneumonia that doctors had given up on, all through the absolute assurance that God's love is an ever-present reality that has absolute and ultimate power in human experience. So she sets down everything she's learned in this book, Science and Health. You go to the last 100 pages that were added in 1902, and these are just accounts from people from every walk of life who read the book, saw the truth in what they were reading, responded to that, and were healed. So these are farmers and businessmen and housewives, people with no prior preparation. They encountered this truth and responded to it. So in answer to that question, can anyone do this? The answer is a definitive yes. Anyone can do this. So now the next question my classmates ask, how? How can we do this? Well, this is the textbook of Christian Science, and so if you were to encounter this book perhaps for the first time, you might have something that you wanted to see healed. And you might want to cut right to the chase, and so you would go to the table of contents and you would see that there was a chapter called Christian Science Practice, and you would think, aha, that's where it will tell me how. And then when you opened to that chapter, you would find close to 4 pages of the account of the unknown woman who shows up at the home of a Pharisee where Jesus is dining, and she washes Jesus' feet with her tears and wipes them with her hair. And you might think, what does that have to do with how to heal? And the answer is that it has everything to do with how to heal. When we find our own natural love of good, which that woman so clearly was expressing, I mean, she was literally throwing herself at the feet of the highest sense of good she had ever found. When we value that good, when we cherish it, when we express it in our thoughts and in our actions, then we're able to find that that goodness is real. It is present. It's very much there and able to help us and anyone that we want to help. So the more aware we are that that goodness is real, and start from that basis, the more we see it and experience it, which is why it's great not to waste a lot of time at that stoplight feeling sad or mad or scared for that person standing there. Last Thanksgiving, NPR ran an interview with a professor from Northeastern who was conducting a study on gratitude. And I was very interested in this because he did define his terms. He defined gratitude as the recognition that good is present that you didn't create yourself. And then what he did is he had this control group go out and look for that. Be conscious that it was there. Spend the day actively looking for it, and then when it was found, engaging with it. He said you have to do it for 30 seconds, minimum 30 seconds. Be glad it's there for 30 whole seconds. Feel grateful for it for 30 whole seconds. Well, the group of people that did this found that they were sleeping better, that their health had improved, that their social relations had improved. Not really surprising given everything that we've been talking about today. So, yeah, yes, absolutely we can do this. And the how of how to do this, it's very natural to us. We're designed to see that good and respond to it. So what would stop us? What would throw the brakes on this wonderful new way of being? I think one of the things is the drama of that presentation. You know, what you see when you open the news in the morning. It is so tempting to react because you think you're dealing with objective reality in that news report. Another thing that would slow us down is just going with the flow, that this is just the way things are, and you're not thinking much about it. Another thing that stops us is outlining what the good is supposed to look like. And I'll give you an example of that. When I was around 7, I had a problem that I was praying about, and the problem was not yielding. It was going on and on. The problem was I did not have a horse. I had talked to God about this horse. I'd been very specific. I'd pestered my parents endlessly. I wanted a 15 two-hand dark bay Arab gelding with a rocking canter. And I think pretty early on in my mother's frustration, she just pointed me at this verse from Mark, where Jesus says, "What things soever ye desire when ye pray, believe that ye receive them, and ye shall have them." And at that time, what that meant to me was, if I just believe really hard, then I will have this horse. So I tried doing that, and it's very hard to do, because other thoughts creep in. And so after 2 Christmases of going out to the garage and opening the door, and there's nothing there but my dad's lawnmower, I knew I was doing something wrong. And at that point, my mom pointed me to something that she thought was going to be more helpful. It's at the first page of the first chapter in Science and Health, which is on prayer. And this is a really good place to start if you're starting this book. But it says, "Desire is prayer, and no loss can occur from trusting God with our desires, that they may be molded and exalted before they take form in words and deeds." And I will tell you that I felt kind of disappointed after I read that, because I didn't want my desires to be molded and exalted. I wanted a 15 two-hand dark bay Arab gelding. And then words and deeds, well, that didn't sound like a horse either. And I just want to say here, there's nothing wrong with having a desire for something or some set of circumstances, but practical prayer, scientific prayer, means that you have to allow that this goodness, it's not only present, but it's spiritual. It's not in some form, some material form. And that God being God is everywhere all the time. That goodness is there all the time. And you've got to start from that basis, which is kind of what brought my mother into Christian Science. So there's actually another translation of that verse from Mark where it says, "I tell you, whatever you pray about and ask for, believe that you have received it, and it will be yours." And I think that sort of gives more of the sense of that recognition of the spiritual nature of good and the fact that it is already there. So I did get a lot of encouragement from my mother, and I did slowly begin to deepen my understanding of God as this always present goodness and love. And I saw that I'd missed the point that Jesus was trying to make. Prayer isn't getting God to do what I wanted. And it took some years, but I started trusting the reality, the presence, the power of that goodness. And as I did this, I started to find, just as my mother had, that you know what? It is real. It's real, and it's satisfying, and it's active right where I was. When I was around 12, a distant relative sent money that enabled me to go to a summer camp where they gave you a horse for the whole summer. That was awesome. When I got into high school, I got a job at a hunt club that my parents could never have afforded to join, and there I had access to riding lessons and wonderful horses. When I got to college, I knew I needed to find a job to help pay for tuition, and I figured, I'd probably waitress or I'd be a cashier or something, but out of the blue came a person who said, "Hey, there's this couple, they're both lawyers, they have these wonderful horses, they're show horses, but they have no time to ride them, and they're looking to pay somebody to ride their horses. Would you be interested?" So I got to do that, and then they allowed me to take them around Southern California and show them, and I wound up riding them in the Olympic trials in '82 in San Dimas, so that was a thrill. But going back to what I was saying before, so much bigger than those things was this growing awareness that God's love is an ever-present, caring reality. So years later, when I took that 2-week class in Christian Science myself, I came out of it with just an exponentially larger sense of how practical this truth was. And at the end of the class, the teacher shook everybody's hand as they were going, and when he got to me, he said, "You will go home and heal." And I thought, oh, surely not yet, I'm not ready for that. But I got home and the phone started ringing, and I was presented with opportunities to give my first metaphysical treatments. One of the first calls came from a woman who called about an ingrown toenail. And she said it was deformed and painful, and she was having trouble walking. Would I pray? Absolutely. And I remember starting that metaphysical treatment with the things that I shared with you at the very beginning today, with the reality of Genesis 1, that God really made everything, and behold, it was very good. And that goodness, there couldn't be some God-free zone where that goodness did not exist. It had to be right where that woman was, and it had to include every bit of her. And I remember thinking about God as love, that love that meets our needs, that cares for us, and that it had to include her. Again, she was not in some God-free zone apart from that. And that was my entry into that closet of prayer, where I discovered more wonderful spiritual truths that I could commune with and think about. And it was a joyful experience. And I just want to emphasize that joy, that awe that the church members would express during a testimony, the relief and the gratitude that you feel in this kind of prayer, it's not incidental or coincidental. It's our very natural response to reality. We're not creating it. When we give a metaphysical treatment, we're responding to it. So, about a year after I had prayed for this woman, I forgot to mention. She called me the next morning and said that the nail was back in its proper shape and there was no more pain, and thank you very much. Well, about a year later, I got a call from her daughter, and she was in an airport on her way to a hospital to see her mother, who had been found unconscious in her apartment. And the daughter said, "I'm not a Christian Scientist. I know how much my mother loves it. I had somebody find her address book, and under P for practitioner, they found your name. Would you pray for her?" And I said, "Of course." And then she proceeded to share with me everything the doctors had told her, that there'd been a stroke, and it had been severe, that there'd been a heart attack, and it had been severe, that there was no treatment possible. She was on life support only, and there was absolutely no hope. And so she should get there as fast as she could. And she also, as she was telling me all this, I could hear the fear. I could hear the impending grief lurking in her voice. So when I got off the phone, I knew that I needed to get into that closet, because I didn't want to take any of that with me. I wanted to be in that place where I can see what God is and what God is doing. So I remember thinking back to how I had prayed for her the first time she'd called, going back to that Genesis 1 understanding of God as the goodness that includes us all, of us as made in the image and likeness of that divine goodness. Again, nobody could be separate from it. Thinking again about the love that was right there with her in that hospital, that embraced everybody who was there, that embraced the daughter as she was traveling. So that again was my entry into that closet of prayer. And again, there were many more joyous thoughts to find in there. She called me, it took 3 hours or so, she called me and told me when she got to the hospital her mom was conscious, which had not been expected. And the doctor said, this is nice, but it's not going to change anything. She called 2 hours later. She said that her mom was off the ventilator. She was off the feeding tube. The doctors again assured her that, this was nice, but it wasn't going to make a difference ultimately. And at that point I said, would you hold the phone up to your mom's ear so she knows she's being prayed for? And I don't remember what I said to her that day, except I remember one thing I said to her. I said, mortal mind always gets it wrong. Right? So that thought, that kind of thinking which would shut God out, or just leave God out, always gets it wrong. And when I said it, she laughed out loud, this bubbling vivacious laugh. And that had not been expected because she wasn't supposed to be able to vocalize. Well, by the next morning, she was vocalizing really well. And she let everybody there know that she wanted to be taken to a Christian Science nursing facility. And this is someplace where healing is going to be expected. So she was transferred to a facility in the state where she lived. At that point, another practitioner took over the case. 3 days later, she was back in her apartment. Now, the doctors had done the best they could with the factors that they thought were real and important. They'd been well-meaning, they'd been kind, but they were missing the critical information. It was prayer and Christian Science that brought that to light, that brought to light those spiritual qualities that made all the difference. So this is what I want to leave you with today. First of all, can you do this? Absolutely. How can we do this? By recognizing and responding to the reality of love and God's goodness. And we can find it in those always present spiritual qualities, those ones found by the mind of Christ. We can turn to them, we can expect them to be there, we can act from them. We've got the right and we've got the ability to question the authority of any lesser understanding of life. And when we do that, it makes a difference. So praying this way opens our view to a world that has always been there, always will be there, a world of practical, provable, dependable divine good. And step by step, we can experience this for ourselves. So I hope, if you haven't before, I hope you'll get a copy of Science and Health and explore it. Take these ideas out for a test drive. If you're familiar with this book, I hope you'll open it up, take a deep dive, take these ideas out for a test drive. I'll leave you with Mary Baker Eddy's own words on the subject. She said, "You can prove for yourselves, dear reader, the science of healing." So thanks again to all of you for being here today.
I'm consistent today. I forgot to mention that Emra is also a teacher of Christian Science. So you've all been taught today. Thanks, everybody, for coming. We hope that we can do this again next year, and we hope even more that we'll be able to see you here. So drive safely on your way home. Grab some cookies on your way out so we don't have to eat them all. What? Oh, there are pins in the foyer if you want to fill out your little card answering questions 1 and 2. So thanks again very much. Drive safely. You never close your eyes.
Second set to lead into James's talk. I've known James for quite a long time, and he was a practitioner for the New Song group way back when we toured the United States some 15 years ago, I think it was, James. And I remember calling you on a regular basis to help the trials and tribulations of being part of the New Song group. Anyway, we're all still friends, which is great. Anyway, this is a version of Love by Mary Baker Eddy, and I think it sort of it will lead into James's talk. Several of these songs are very suitable for that. So this is a version of Mary Baker Eddy, Mary Baker Eddy's poem Love. wooed us with thy sheltering ring, 'neath which our spirits blend, like brother birds that soar and sing, and on the same branch bend. The arrow that wound the dove darts not from those who watch and love. If thou the bending reed wouldst break by thought or word unkind, pray that his spirit you partake, who loved and healed mankind. Seek holy thoughts and heavenly strain that make men one and love remain. Learn too that wisdom's rod is given for faith to kiss and know that greetings glorious from high heaven, whence joy supernal flow, come from that love divinely near, which chastens pride and earthborn fear, through God who gave that word of might which swelled creation's lay. Let there be light, and there was light. What chased the clouds away? 'Twas love whose finger traced you were with me. You were with me from the start. Every breath, every sigh, you are closer than the sky. Every tear, every dream, you are right here. You are right here, holding me. You are closer than a whisper. You are stronger than my fear. In the quiet, in the stillness, I can feel you standing near. I don't need to see to trust you. I don't need to face the light. You are closer than a whisper. You are shining in my life. are closer than a whisper. You are stronger than my fear. In the quiet, in the stillness, I can feel you standing near. I don't need to see to trust you. I don't need to chase the light. You are closer than a whisper. You are shining in my life. Every breath, every sigh, you are closer than the sky. Every tear, every dream, you are right here. You are right here, holding me. You are closer than a whisper. You are stronger than my fear. In the quiet, in the stillness, I can feel you standing near. I don't need to see to trust you. I don't need to chase the light. You are closer than a whisper. You are shining in my life. You are shining. Shining in my life.